Quite often in a program you'll want to repeat things. So here I've created a program that prints the word hello 10 times, and if I run that we can see that it will work. So there we go, it's printing hello 10 times. But is that a sensible way to do it? Can you see any problems with that approach? Well, one is, you have to be quite careful when you're counting up how many times you're doing something. So I'm only doing it 10 times there. If you wanted to do it 100, 1,000, a million times, that would obviously be quite a bit more complicated. Also, if I want to change that, so if I decide I want to say hi 10 times now, that's a bit of a fiddle to change it all, isn't it? So I could use search and replace, or I'd have to go through and type that. So there's probably a better way to do it. Quite often in programming you do want to repeat a single thing. So rather than saying print hello 10 individual times, we could tell the computer to print hello and do it 10 times. So luckily there is a way to do that, and that's a very common thing to want to do in a program. Python's a little bit unusual. Most programming languages have a for loop which has an idea of counting. So in BASIC, for example, you could say for n equals 1 to 10, which effectively means count from 1 to 10. And most other languages, C, Java, etc., do a similar thing. Python is a little bit unusual in that for doesn't have this idea of counting. It has this idea of looking through a list. So I'm just going to show you first of all how to create the list containing the numbers that you want to use. Okay, so there's a command called range, and what that does is it creates a list of numbers. So if you want to do something 10 times, we need to create a list with 10 numbers in it. So you can do that as simply as typing range 10, and what that'll do is that'll give you, notice that's a thing called a list in Python. So it's a list of 10 numbers. First thing to notice is that Python quite often counts from 0, which is something that people aren't quite used to when they start programming. And it only goes up to 9. So it quite often stops one short of the number you put in here, if you're thinking that it's counting up to 10. Another way to think of it is that it's giving you 10 numbers. So 0 to 9 is in fact 10 numbers. So range 10 is giving you a list of 10. However, it does seem to behave in a slightly inconsistent way, as you'll see in just a minute. So actually thinking of it stopping one short is quite a good way of thinking about it. So the range command can take a single number, and the single number is one more than the number you want to count up to. So if I do range 5, for example, it'll do 0 to 4, which is 5 numbers. If I don't want to start at 0, or if I want to count down, or if I want to count up in steps other than 1, I can add additional numbers in there. So if I wanted to count from 5 to 10, for example, instead of 0 to 4, I can do range, and I can give it 2 numbers. So the first number is where to start, and the second number is, well, again, it's one more than you want to count to. So if I do 5, 11, it'll count up to 10, because it's got this thing about stopping one short. So range 5, 11 counts from 5 up to 10. So giving me the numbers in between, up in steps of 1. What you could also do is you can add a third number, which is the size of the steps. So by default it goes up in steps of 1, but if you want another step size, you can do this. So you can count up to, if you went from 5 to 15 in steps of 5, then what we get is 5, 10 and 15. So we can do that. We can also do it the other way. So if you wanted to count down, so if you're counting down, the number you start at is going to be bigger than the one you end at, and then the step size is going to be negative. So -1. So now we're going to count from 10 down to, well, actually, again, it stops one short. So if you want to count from 10 down to 1, you need to make that 0. So now it counts from 10 down to 1, going down one at a time. And again, you can do a similar sort of thing. So you could do range 100 -1 -10. So what that would do is count from 10 down to 0, going down in steps of 10. So it takes a bit of getting used to this idea. It's slightly different from other programming languages if you've used things like JavaScript or BASIC, which have more of a counting idea. But once you get the hang of it, it is quite useful to be able to do this, to look through a list. So if we wanted to use that in a program, so if we want to print something 10 times, we can use this idea. So we can say there's a command called for, and you need a variable which is called a loop counter. So it doesn't matter what you call it. So I'm going to use n for number, and then you say in range 10. So basically n is going to become each value in the list of numbers from 0 to 9 in turn, and then we have a colon on the end, and then we have something that you want to do. So in my case, printing hello. So what that'll do is it'll print the word hello 10 times. So n works its way through the list, becoming each value in turn, and each time it does that, it'll do the thing that you've indented. So notice the print is moved away from the margin. I've used the tab key to move that across. In most programming languages, indentation is a matter of style, but in Python it's actually part of the syntax, so you do need to indent it, and that's all you need to do. So if I want to print hello 10 times, that's all I need to type in, and when I run that, I get my 10 hellos. So that's a much shorter program than the original one where I just had print hello 10 times. So the indented section is the bit that gets repeated. So if I then type in some text against the left margin, that bit won't be repeated. That'll be done once at the end. So if I run this, what I'll get is hello 10 times and the end once at the end, because that's not indented. Okay, so repeating things is as easy as that. What we can also do is use that value of n. So if instead of printing hello, I printed n, when I run my program, what's it going to do? Well, n will become each number in the list in turn, and then it will print that number. So n will be, first of all, it'll be 0, and then it'll be 1, and then it'll be 2. So each time I print, it'll print a different number. So if I run that program, it gives me all the numbers from 0 to 9. And in fact, we can do anything we like with that. So I could do a calculation with that. So if I wanted to add 1 to it, for example, instead of going from 0 to 9, it would go from 1 to 10. Or obviously, if I wanted to double it or something, I could do that. So I could say times 2, and then it would go effectively the 2 times table, and I can combine that with other text. So if I wanted to have some sort of heading, so for example, I could have so remember, if I'm combining with a plus, I need to force any numbers to be strings. So I'm going to turn n into a string so I can add it on. So if I do that now, it'll print day and the number. So I'm adding the number from the loop counter, or it's not a loop counter in the case of Python, it's the value in the list, to the text. So that's quite useful, because what I could do is if I wanted to do a times table, for example, I could take that number and I could multiply it by something. So if I was printing out a times table, I could have, let's just have table equals 2. So that's which table we're doing. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from, we normally start at 1 with our times tables. So from 1 to 12. So remember, it stops 1 short, so I'm doing 13. And then let's build up a string of something we want to print. So what I'm going to print is fact, let's do it without the brackets because that makes it easier. We don't need to force everything to be strings. So I'm going to do n, which is the number. We'll have a times. Then we'll have the table we're doing. Oops, if I can type it correctly. And then we'll have an equal sign. And then we can actually do a calculation with that. So the actual answer there is going to be table times n, isn't it? So what I'm doing is I'm combining all these things. I'm combining n, which is the number from the list, an x, so it looks like a multiply, table, which is the table we're doing, and then an equal sign, and then an actual calculation. So when I run this, what I'll get is my 2 times table. And if I change the value of the table at the top, what I'll get is my 3 times table. So notice that that table there is actually much longer than my program, isn't it? So that's quite an efficient way of doing things. One other thing that you can do with for is actually you can make a list. So if you know what a list is, then you can have you can create one in Python. So Monday, Tuesday. I won't put all the days in because you don't want to sit there watching me type. But I'll put the first 3 in. And now if I say for n in days, print n, what that'll do is n will become each item in that list. So that will then print Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday on separate lines. So it doesn't have to be a list of numbers, it can be a list of other things such as text.